And what shifts is simply that this subconscious is looking at the world, it's deciphering, detecting certain things that then get taken in and interpreted either as bad or as something we have to protect ourselves from, or as positive, something to be happy about.
Welcome, Sounds True One friends. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Dr. Friedemann Schaub. Let me tell you a little bit about Friedman. I interviewed him for the first time more than a decade ago, and our conversations stayed with me. He's an unusual person. Take a listen. He received a medical degree from the University of Munich in Germany and then pursued a career in cardiology. He became concerned, practicing cardiology, about how little time cardiologists had to spend connecting with their patients. And he decided to take a break and accepted a scholarship for a postdoctoral research position at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he earned a PhD in molecular biology. Now, the story gets interesting. Friedman became interested in the intelligence of every cell in our body and how our conscious mind can collaborate with our subconscious mind. Friedman writes, "From the age of 10 until my early 30s, I suffered from anxiety, low self-esteem, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. But once I learned how to work consciously with the subconscious mind, I was able to turn my emotional challenges into catalysts to discover my authentic truth." And this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what Friedman can teach us about how we each can use our conscious mind to collaborate with our subconscious. Friedman's the author, which sounds true, of the book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution, and he's published a new book called The Empowerment Solution. Friedman, welcome.
Thank you so much. I was so excited to be with you again. So nice to see you.
This whole notion that we can collaborate using our conscious mind with our subconscious mind. So let's start. Introduce us to your understanding of this potential collaboration.
Well, let's start with the subconscious, because the subconscious is ultimately, something we all use, but we're not really aware of. Well, that's why it's called subconscious. The subconscious is that deeper part of the mind that a lot of people blame for all these unwanted thoughts and patterns. I wanted to lose weight, but somehow I find myself having 5-pound ice cream in the shopping cart. How is that possible? So the subconscious is often blamed more for our misery than utilized for our benefit. The subconscious is responsible not only for emotions and habits and patterns, but it also is responsible for how our body works, because a lot of things we do are really unconscious. Even when you're saying, I want to lift my arm, well, you do it consciously, but then everything, the execution, the flexion of the muscles and the extensions and all of those things are unconscious or subconscious. And then all the memories we ever had and all our values and ideas of morals all comes from the subconscious and is anchored in the subconscious. So you can imagine subconscious is a pretty important and busy part. It has only one problem. It pretty much does whatever it has started to do early in our lives. And early in our lives, it was there to protect us. It was telling us, okay, your brain is not very developed. You're pretty small and helpless. So let me take over here. And let me make sure that you're okay. And so it developed ideas of why is dad always in a grumpy mood? Or why we are left alone in the room next door for hours? Does this mean something? And the subconscious says, okay, maybe it means you're not really wanted. So how do we make sure that you still get fed and protected? Be invisible, hide out or be the pleaser and make sure that your daddy's or mommy's good girl or good boy, or be the achiever who has always straight A's, then you may get what you need and a little bit of love on top of it. And so these patterns, these subconscious patterns, most of us still live in. And unless we are consciously telling the subconscious, we don't have to live in these patterns anymore. We don't have to go through all of these same self-protective motions. It will continue to do exactly that. And so that's where the conscious mind comes in and say, I need to take over. I need to teach my subconscious what we can do to not just go for safety, but go maybe for fulfillment, for purpose, for passion.
Now, Friedman, I'd like to understand a little bit more how we actually know anything about the subconscious mind, if you will. Because, I've heard statistics that it's running 70% of our behaviors of our life. I've heard it as high as 90%. How would we even know that number? And also, how do we, you've made a lot of claims in this first answer about what the subconscious mind is, that it's here to protect us, that it was formed early in our life. How do we know these things?
Well, in fact, we don't really, and the numbers are also, very controversial. Is it really 70% or not? So most of what we know is either coming from way back from Freud and Jung and so on, who didn't necessarily do the research around it, but they certainly had a lot of people they worked with that, made them realize, okay, the system that we are really entangled in is not so much our intellect. It's really much more the emotional, the deeper parts that play a role. Now, what I know and what we all know is our subconscious in action. So a very simple example is you go to work. And you're already thinking about maybe a meeting there or a difficult discussion, but somehow you're driving and you're not even paying attention. Who does the driving? Who stops at a red light automatically? Who somehow pays attention that, someone is passing by? You just have this little notion, this little intuition, look and say, oops, that was close. So there are all these under the radar functions that we are not choosing. Same thing with negative thoughts. How many times do we have a negative thought that is at the most inopportune moment? You go on a date or you are supposed to give some talk and all of a sudden you have the thought of, oh, this is going to not go well. You're not really smart enough. And, then you're interpreting something as negative automatically, even though no, I should be focused. I should actually be charming for my date, or whatever the thing that you're consciously knowing better, they get overwritten by something that inside has another idea. And that is where the subconscious comes in. And what you could maybe say is what the subconscious and the conscious mind is differentiating is that the subconscious is what we are not really consciously deciding. It's more whatever automatic comes up. So if I would ask you, think about the room you grew up in. You haven't thought about this. It just comes up, that memory of the color. Maybe you can see the window. Maybe you even have a certain smell of that room. Where was that memory before? Yes, somewhere in your neural network. But if we go to the discussion of conscious, subconscious, higher consciousness, that's just the other way of looking at it. And I think it's a much more empowering way, because I cannot really go into my brain to make changes, but I certainly can go into these conscious, subconscious patterns to make changes.
Now, you mentioned a connection between our emotions and our subconscious mind. Can you help me understand that more?
Well, when you really think about emotions, especially the emotions that we call negative, they're equally coming up at times when we don't want to feel them. I mean, we can wake up grumpy. We can wake up with, the wrong side of the leg or the wrong leg hitting the ground or whatever we talk about. And we don't even have a reason why. We don't even know why. And then at the same day, we can all of a sudden feel in a great mood. Once again, nothing changed, same person, same circumstances, but something shifted inside. And what shifts is simply that this subconscious is looking at the world, it's deciphering and detecting certain things that then get taken in and interpreted either as bad or as something we have to protect ourselves from, or as positive, something to be happy about. And they have done these wonderful studies, for example, in how fast the subconscious can compute information. People sitting in cinemas and they're watching something like a happy little story. And while they are watching it, they have been very quickly disturbing images interdispersed into this happy story so fast that the conscious mind doesn't really compute it. But what changes every time there is an image of someone dead or a kid crying or anything that was kind of, shaken up when you would look at it consciously, the subconscious picks it up, and what changed with the people that watched it, even though they were not aware of it, is either the heart rate or the resistance of their skin, which indicated that there is stress happening, that there is something that the subconscious noticed that is not really fitting into this happy story, and it was startled. Consciously, no idea. Subconsciously, we were aware of it.
And you mentioned that the filters of our subconscious mind are formed primarily early in our life. Talk to me about that. What is this formation in our subconscious mind of these filters that we then see the world through?
You can imagine it starts with an event. And often when I talk to people about, what happened the first time you experienced, some kind of an anxiety, it often starts with a startling, confusing event, something that just, doesn't really fit into the idea of us feeling safe or loved. Then, if the event is repeating itself, then there's usually an emotion with it. Maybe there is from the confusion comes stress, comes anxiety, comes insecurity. That's already a big, okay, I need to be prepared. I need to watch out for this not happening again. And if these events happen again and again, the subconscious says, okay, we have to somehow make sense out of this. So for me, for example, I was a happy-go-lucky child. I was just looking at the world with all the magic possible. I saw walls moving and, just like in all its little energetic particles, a little bit like in the Matrix. And my mom just said, you probably have a fever. But I was sure I can see the energy of everything. And life was good. But then all of a sudden, there were some startling moments. My father was in a bad mood. And, there was fights. And they didn't hide their fights from me. I had a bad grade in school. I was definitely scolded for that. Things that occurred that made me just feel shaken up. It made me wonder, is the world really safe? Is it really here, peace and harmony? And keep in mind, my name is Friedemann, which means man of peace. So my whole idea and identity was all about peace. And when things didn't feel peaceful anymore, I felt unsafe. And then eventually I heard from my parents saying that you're not really smart. You're kind of a late bloomer. You're probably going to have it always a little hard in life. And that made me, of course, wonder, oh my God, how will I ever not only succeed, but also receive approval, love, a sense of belonging? And so what my subconscious said, here is a solution. You're not that great, so let's just work extra hard to always somehow succeed, reach higher and higher goals, be the best in class, become a doctor, and then make another doctorate happen. And all of those things were really based on these early beliefs of me having a sense of conditional acceptance and conditional love. And that happened very early on. And when I tracked back to this early times, I realized that the sting and the pain and the confusion hadn't really gone away until I worked with it, again, with my subconscious mind, so that it could be released and that I could change this filter, the filter of not being good enough, the filter of only being traditionally acceptable. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Of course, I think many people listening say, yeah, I have a filter, and that filter says you're not really worth anything, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z to earn love. It might be achievement, or as you point out in your new book, The Empowerment Solution, it might be pleasing other people. If I'm a super pleaser, then maybe I'll get the love that I want. But in your case, and let's keep talking about you for a moment, Friedman, you somehow in your early 30s found a way to work through the sense of worthlessness that you felt inside that you were compensating for and all the anxiety that came with it. How did you work through it?
Oh, probably after I had one of the lowest times in my life. When I came to Seattle, being successful in my career as a doctor and realizing that's all I am. I only have that. I was basically stripped away from my nice apartment, from the relationship I was in, from, the status, and I became a little student in a big lab and pretty much, a nobody because I had no clue of what I was doing. And I had to face myself. I had to face myself without any of those achievement mask or extra layers that protected me from feeling not good enough. And all of a sudden I had to face again the same feeling that I had been facing already when I was little. I am not good enough. And who am I if I'm not really successful or if I'm not having any achievements? And so I had so much anxiety and pain and insecurity and felt like, again, how in the early days, everyone observes me, everyone judges me. I could see little bubbles, speech bubbles come out of their heads, having negative thoughts about me, of course, all imagination, but it felt terrible. And then I stumbled across yoga and meditation. And that was a first step for me to realize there is something bigger to me than just this sense of, achievement or some kind of a degree or whatever I thought I was. And at the beginning, I was just feeling the energy of peace after a yoga class or after a meditation. And that lasted about 5 minutes. And then I felt like, wow, these 5 minutes are so different. And that 5 minutes, then the next week, maybe it was 6 minutes. And I just kept on going because it felt so good. And eventually I did find that there was something inside of me that I was looking for, which I would say is the essence of our being. And I could connect to this through these different means, but I wasn't able to resolve these patterns and beliefs until I did start working with subconscious methods like hypnotherapy or neurolinguistic programming. So in some ways, I had to first anchor myself and find that my truth goes beyond the descriptions of my jobs or whatever things I was hanging on my wall. And then I had to go back into my past and basically understood that the past is an enormous library for us to grow from, but it's not defining us. We are the creators. We are the one who choose who we want to grow into and what ultimately we want to see ourselves as. And if we have this essence as a baseline, I think we cannot really go wrong.